Hello, and welcome to the third installment of the Vampire Jenny reading series. You've heard this all before. There's blood involved in this one, and I'm pretty sure... Yeah, just... Oh, and references to trauma and panic attacks. That one's there too. If you don't like that, you should probably leave. But that's all for warnings, I think, this time. Anyway, I'm just going to get started and give a little refresher on where we left off. She wouldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let Vecna take over her that easily. Steve eventually left the bathroom and allowed Jenny to take a shower and get all of the upside-down particles out of her hair. The radio was still blowing up, so Steve and Eddie were trying to address questions. Mostly Eddie, because Steve was picking up Dustin and clothes for Jenny to change into. You can't just drop a bomb like that and not reply, Jenny, Robin crowed in a frenzy of emotions that Eddie could hear through the radio. Yeah, you have to say over when you finish talking, Robin. Over, Dustin stated, clearly just barely keeping it together. Guys, can you chill out? You're bursting my eardrums. Over, Eddie snapped. How are you so calm, Eddie? Over, Dustin asked anxiously. Harrington is on his way to pick up clothes for Jenny and you because you're her neighbor, Henderson. We're trying not to overwhelm her with people at the moment, but just in case she goes feral and tries to kill someone. Her words, not mine. Over, Eddie responded, glancing at the bloodstains on the floor and trying not to remember when she went limp in front of him. Why would she try to kill someone? Over, Robin shrieked. Did you not hear the part where she's probably definitely a vampire? I don't know if you remember, but she definitely died in front of me and Henderson. I am 150% positive there was no pulse. Over, Eddie retorted, forcing himself not to focus on the image of her body torn to bits. Oh my god, Eddie. She was talking about D&D. Common bats aren't supposed to kill you. They only do damage. Over, Dustin said through the walkie, voice quiet in realization. That would make sense. Do you want to talk to her when you get over here? Over, Eddie stated, knowing Jenny would never hurt Dustin. She cared about him a lot, and they had always had a strangely close bond he couldn't explain. Wait, what are you talking about? Over, Robin asked, bewildered. Dungeons and Dragons, Eddie remarked, hearing Harrington's car pull into Henderson's driveway on the other line. I'm on my way. Over and out, Dustin remarked while frantically clambering into Steve's car. Eddie listened to the static and smiled. He couldn't wait to see Henderson's face when he reunited with his neighbor. Now let's get into the next section. Jenny emerged from the shower, having heard everything. Enhanced senses were useful sometimes. Her hair smelled like green apple rather than the peach smell it normally had. She was glad to be free from the grime and dry blood of the Upside Down, and would definitely make fun of Steve for using Farrah Fawcett spray, which she noted was on his kitchen sink. Not kitchen sink, bathroom sink. I cannot read. She was more concerned about... She took her time doing her hair, knowing Steve was on his way with clean clothes and Dustin. She was more concerned about Dustin getting flashbacks, so she took great care to make sure her hair looked like it did before the whole debacle with Vecna began. Once she was done, she decided to take advantage of bathroom acoustics, singing Brown-Eyed Girl into a hairbrush until she heard the front door open. She retrieved clothes from Steve and got dressed. She could hear Dustin pacing. Hey, Dustin, she grinned, engulfing him in a hug. He smelled like salty tears and Doritos and a certain feeling of home that can't adequately be put into words. He shook in her arms and nearly tackled her when he saw her. I told Steve that if he was lying, I'd never talk to him again, Dustin said between sobs. In all fairness, I do not think you could pull that off. Steve is like one of 3 people you can talk about what actually happened at Starcourt, and one of them would be dead, Jenny remarked with a grin. Was the mall fire a cover-up? Eddie asked Steve in a whisper that Dustin clearly didn't pick up on. Yeah, there were 2 very bad things happening at the same time. We signed an NDA. Steve whispered back. So, one thing to put on the list of vampire lore that applies to me, enhanced senses. I can hear you both talking. Also, Dustin was right about my last words, Jenny stated, still holding Dustin. Jenny, could you not? Steve asked begrudgingly. Steve, remember when I found you sitting in the mall bathroom with Robin and singing like Muppets? I heard a bit more of that conversation before you got to that point. There's a reason she's my favorite. I already had good hearing, but now I can hear even more than normal. Jenny remembered, thinking back to hearing bits of their conversation about Tammy Thompson. Wait, you heard that? Also, did you just imply what I think you implied? Steve asked in shock. Dustin has known since he asked me out and I rejected him before he left for summer camp. Even before I knew for sure about Robin, I thought she was the absolute coolest. I also distinctly remember pausing fast times at 53 minutes 5 seconds in your presence exclusively to stare at cleavage. You just suck at picking up on signals. Jenny drawled easily, as if she hadn't just outed herself to the town freak and a former jock. If I had $1 for every time someone has come out to me following a life or death situation, I'd have $2, Steve murmured, probably to himself. His ignorance amused the vampire. You'd be surprised who else is some flavor of queer. I won't name names because that's not my secret to tell, but we just kinda know. There's only so many ways of hiding it. Most of them are very noticeable when you have the same experience, she noted, deciding not to mention that a lot of times bullies were right on the money. I'm just going to ask, are you talking about Will? Because you told us that we'd both be dating someone before you got a boyfriend, and I just now realize you worded that really weird. Dustin asked, in that knowing way that meant he earnestly wanted to know something. Jenny had gotten used to that tone for asking if someone was okay. I'm not supposed to say. I can neither confirm nor deny who it is, Jenny stated, rolling her eyes at Dustin's lack of tact. Let's just find some other vampire stuff about you. Can you eat normal food? Steve asked, diverting the topic. I can try. Do you have any cereal? The other things I can think of to test right now are garlic, turning into a bat, healing, crucifix, and agility. Jenny replied, sitting at the kitchen counter and waiting patiently. I'll get the big J and a knife or something. Can you handle the foodstuffs, Stevie? Eddie smirked, without waiting for a response. Fine. I'll get garlic first, I guess. He sets a clove of garlic on the counter, and Dustin starts furiously scribbling notes. Jenny doesn't feel anything different and isn't bothered by touching it either. She was able to eat the cereal, but it doesn't do anything for her thirst for blood. Her vampire strength allowed her to lift Steve several inches off the ground. She wasn't bothered by the crucifix either. Things got interesting when they tried to test how rapidly she healed by slashing across her wrist. Something inside of her panicked, and suddenly she couldn't see. All the voices were garbled and sounded odd somehow. The demo bat hissed at the boys, making Eddie and Dustin flinch. It flew right at Steve's face and nearly got there before stopping abruptly, transforming back into Jenny, who was looking at him with worry. Steve scrambled away from her, shaking. Steve, look at me. Look at me. The girl attempted to assure him, tilting his chin so they made eye contact, and Steve went stock still. Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you on purpose, Jenny stated as soothingly as she could muster. It was like a switch clicked, and Steve's breathing slowed down, and his eyes went slightly hazy, like he couldn't focus enough to panic. What just happened? Steve asked, sounding like something was forcefully preventing him from freaking out. Dustin looked at Eddie in confusion and terror. Eddie couldn't tell if he was horrified or impressed with the display of power. Jenny was mortified. How could she let this happen? Of course her change in eye color meant something. What if Steve was just forced to be calm now forever? She just wanted to help, but in the end she ended up scaring the 3 people who didn't think she was a monster. She turned into a bat and flew away. To where? She didn't know. Just away from whatever just happened.